From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme Three podcast. Hello and welcome, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, friends and family to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles, the show where we pick three films based off of one theme. We are your hosts. I'm Nicholas Ibarra. I'm joined as always by my fabulous friend, Bella Estratus. Bella, tell the people what is good.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm seriously so excited for today. We're doing a queer horror episode, two-parter as well. So much to look forward to this week.
Much to look forward to this week. And for both parts, we have a very special guest with us, a good friend of mine, a brilliant writer, and a horror movie aficionado, Jess McLaughlin. Jess, thank you for joining us on the Gimme Three podcast.
Yes. I am a longtime listener, first time call in. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am beyond excited. I was just geeking out. So I'm just very happy.
That's why we're here. We're here to geek out. Indeed, this, we're kicking off Pride Month. Happy Pride Month, everybody, by giving you not one, but two episodes highlighting queer horror films. And a part of the reason why we're doing this is because Miss McLaughlin here is in pre-production for a queer horror film herself. So, Jess, why don't you tell us a little bit about your upcoming short film, Pangs?
I would be delighted. I have a wonderful queer puberty horror short film that we are getting ready to film very soon, this summer / early fall. And what is it about? It's about a birthday sleepover that becomes a battleground for preteen frenemies when one of them gets their first period and starts transforming into a vampire.
Oh my God, I love it.
It's not like a traumatic situation at all, like middle school birthday party, that's never been a bad situation for anyone. So I really just had to imbue a lot of horror. No, it's already a rife situation, so much angst, so many emotions.
Yes.
And then putting in, vampirism into it and the menstrual cycle as well, it's just
so cool.
I'm very excited. And thank you. I'm
so excited about this. Can I ask what inspired you to do this? Or if not that, what was kind of the thing that drew you into writing horror stories?
Oh, into horror in general?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That's a great question.
Sorry, it's kind of broad, but I just love horror so much as well. And so I'm always I think it's so cool to be able to write these types of stories that, especially with Pangs, bringing in menstrual themes and stuff like that. I think it's just brilliant. So I'm very curious about, where that came from, I guess.
Well, I've always loved horror. And I get it from my mom. My mom swears that she did not like horror. When I was coming up and I was in high school and I would talk to her about liking horror stuff and being oh, hey, I just saw this great new movie, blah, blah, blah. And she was I don't know how you can watch that. I couldn't watch that. And then this woman is literally sitting and watching nothing but true crime. We're watching Dateline all the freaking time.
Right.
It's
that shit's scarier than the horror movies.
Right.
Yeah.
We would watch when I was little, we would watch America's Most Wanted every Saturday. And then one day it finally dawned on me that all these people were still out there. And I was oh my God. And so, yeah. And she, there's all kinds of things I could, she showed me when I was 5 years old, I saw the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Which is super campy. But when I was 5, I was oh my God.
Yeah, the camp goes over your head and it's just the horror at that age.
Yes. And then also she would tell me the whole plot to Pet Sematary. And so she said it started started with her. And then I just kind of like, as I was getting older and growing up, I kept coming back to horror because, as a viewer, because there were so many strong women. And yes, there was like problematic stuff, like with, you know, the final girl trope and some of, you know, the themes that are in some horror movies around women. But it really was like consistently, I'm looking for like a strong female protagonist. You can find it more often in horror than not. So
probably more often in horror than most other genres that are out there. At least in American cinema.
Yes. Right. So that's, I just kind of, you know, in making stuff myself, I was privileged enough to go to an arts high school. Awesome. And I started making films like in the 10th grade. And so cool. All of my stuff, I don't know why people weren't more concerned, because all of my stuff was about like women killing men. And
the best kind.
Like it was like, oh, this person is like, oh, these two are married and she just really wants to kill her husband. And like, you know, it was stuff like that.
You're ahead of your time. Ahead of your time.
Yes. Exactly. And so when I went to college, I don't know, I kind of thought that I couldn't do horror. I don't know, because no one was doing it. And so I stopped, but I was miserable and I thought I was just like shit at all of it. I was just like, I can't write, I can't direct, I'm a hack. And then I just like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years later, I had a lot of like things happen in my life and circuitous routes. And then I came back to it and I was like, I've always liked horror. Why did I feel like I didn't have to do it? Because then once I got back in the genre, it was like I could finish a story no problem in terms of like, you know, the basic outline and like, you know, and I just like, it was where my passion was. So
it was like a return to home. Yeah.
Yes. It was like I was coming home, and it's really, I won't go into detail about like all the things that are amazing about the horror genre, because that's me talking for 2 hours. But it's really just like a genre where anything's possible, really.
Yes, totally.
And it's so metaphorical, and it's just, it's so beautiful. And I really, it's my, like you said, I love that you said that, Bella. It's like my home. So I love working in the horror genre, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
I love that.
And you know, I know we've got a lot of filmmakers who listen to our show, but we have a lot of non-filmmakers who listen to our show as well. And our filmmaker fans know what it takes to make a short film. But for our non-filmmaker fans, you know, it just a peek behind the curtain. It takes a lot to make a movie. It takes equipment and locations, and it takes a village, really, as they say. And then you got to feed that village too. So I know we talk about movies a lot here, but if you want to be a part of a movie and you want to help bring Jess's amazing vision to life, which I feel extremely honored that I have read Pangs, and it is tremendous and amazing, and I can't wait to see it on the big screen. But if you want to help make it happen, you can donate to her crowdfunding campaign, which is launching on June 8th. Is that correct, Jess?
June 18th.
June 18th.
Yes.
June 18th it is launching. So is there a place where they can follow you or where they can go to stay abreast to when they can start donating?
Yes. So we have, you know, all the social medias, you know, we're really tapped in. And so if you search for Pangs Film on X, you'll find us. I think on Instagram it's pangs_film. But when in doubt, if you go to abnormalfilm.com, that's my production company. That's where everything's going to be. All the links to the campaign, social media, everything. That's the one-stop shop. So abnormalfilm.com, you can find us and all the information.
And we'll put a link to that in our episode description also. So for our listeners out there, you can scroll down and you'll find the link to Abnormal Films. So fucking A, hey, man, so much talking about movies on this show. Now, listeners, you get to help get one made. What a privilege.
Seriously.
But in the meantime, we're going to keep talking about some movies. So here we go. Gimme Three queer horror films. And our guest, Jess, is going to start us off here with our first one. So, Jess, take it away.
There's no pressure whatsoever.
No pressure.
So we are starting with the 2018 Giallo-inspired horror film called Knife and Heart. And it is directed by Jan Gonzalez. And it was co-written by Gonzalez and Cristiano Mangione. Sorry, Cristiano, if I butchered your last name. But one thing that's, I think, fun to highlight as well is that all of the original music was done by M83. So if we have any like electronic music fans, because Jan Gonzalez's brother is like the founder of M83. So talk about like lucking into.
Yeah, I was so hyped when I read that. I was like, oh my God. Amazing.
Right? It's like, oh, hey, bro, you want to come do my movie? And he's like, yeah. And it's like, oh, it just happens to be fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, what a beautiful collaboration. Like, are you kidding me?
So Knife and Heart was an official selection of the 2018 Cannes Film Festival. And the film starts in Paris in 1979, where a killer is stalking the streets. And we immediately see this killer target and dispatch a beautiful blonde gay man in a brutal act of sexualized violence. This man happens to be one of the actors of Anne Perez, who is a director and producer of gay pornography. Anne's a mess, okay? She is not in a good place. And she's especially heartbroken after her breakup with her film editor, Lois. You know, don't date people from work. And they have to see each other all the time. I mean, Lois is gorgeous. I mean,
oh my God, yeah.
So I understand. But Anne is desperate to win her back, and she starts pulling from real life to creatively spice up her porn films so that she can impress Lois, because Lois just thinks that everything that they make is shit. So Anne's gay porn stars continue to be killed off by this masked figure, and it's obvious that Anne's company, and maybe even Anne herself, is being targeted. So when Anne goes to the police, she is ignored. She decides she's going to put together the pieces to catch the killer, stop the predation on her community, but most importantly, to finish her latest masterpiece and get her girl back. That's a little bit about Knife and Heart.
What a perfect introduction.
Yes.
I gotta say, thank you so much for introducing me to this film. Like, this is my kind of shit. I loved it. Oh my God. I love movies that kind of blend like really kind of, especially with horror, like a gnarly, gritty realism, but also like dreamy surrealism. And I just thought this film was a perfect balance of those two. So I really, really enjoyed it right off the bat for that. And then I feel like I also kind of discovered like a new genre for me that I feel like I'm really drawn to, which was Giallo. Like I wasn't really, I hadn't really seen a lot of Giallo films before this. And so now I'm like, oh my God, I need to start. I've started making like a list of all the most famous Giallo filmmakers. I'm like, I need to watch Dario Argento, like Mario Bava. And I'm just very excited to go down that path. So thank you for putting me onto this, because it's leading me down a whole new horror path, which is really exciting.
Oh, I love to hear that. It's my honor.
I gave the film 5 stars on Letterboxd, and that may not be doing the film justice. Kind of like, I almost said the exact same thing in my notes, Bella. This is one of those films where I sat back, I threw it on, and I was like, oh, this was made for me. This is my shit.
Yeah.
Shot on 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter. The film is just dripping, oozing with style. I mean, and the cold open to the film, like even before we get the main title card.
Yeah.
You see like this scene of the murderer / monster like luring on this young actor. You've got the aura of this intense, dangerous sensuality. You've got the amazing M83 score. And you got this homage to the much maligned 80s homo slasher Cruising. I'm not sure if you've ever seen Cruising, but and all of that is accomplished with no dialogue. This like first 5-minute sequence, no dialogue. And it's just like, God damn, it feels like you're in the hands of a master here. And the film just gets better from that opening sequence. I was just locked in.
There's not a moment in this that was lacking or like where I like started to get lost. It was just like power through all the way to the very end, which I love in a horror movie as well.
Yeah.
No, like this, I do want to just call out one of the best fucking weapons in horror.
Oh my God, yes. We have to.
You don't think, you're like, no. And then it's like, what?
It's unreal. Yeah, this movie had my jaw on the floor. I was so upset I was watching it by myself because I kept just like looking around being like, oh my God, who can I like talk to about this? Like, this shit is fucking crazy.
Right? And it's also like, I love what you guys are saying because like, one of my big things, if anyone has ever talked to me about horror movies, one of the things that I will always say is that I hate when I watch a horror movie and you can feel that someone doesn't have love for the genre. When somebody loves the genre, it is just like you can't contain it. Like it pours off the screen. And like when you watch this movie, you have so much love and passion coming from Jan Gonzalez for not only the horror genre, for giallo, but for like queer spaces, queer people, for film, like the act of filmmaking in general, like, you know, like all of the wonderful, like, what is it? The brutality of like they, in the editing, putting the film cutting that Lois is doing with the actual killing of the, Carl? The beautiful blonde, like the just like intercutting between these two like very violent acts, but how they then create something, you know, for this killer. It's this, you know, this sensual release, and like in the final, you know, the film that she's putting together, it's kind of that as well because it's this porn film. Like it's just, I don't know, like the visual storytelling in this film is just, it's so good.
It's unreal. Yeah, I feel like this is just such a beautiful example of experimentation in movies, like the colors, the visuals, even like I'm obsessed with the cinematography of this film. I loved every single shot, even like the shots that were maybe arguably kind of cheesy, like that one spinning shot in the forest with the killer inching closer and closer each time. Personally, I was like, this is so awesome and like so creepy. But yeah, it's like all of these unique type of shots work so well because there's just already such an exciting kind of experimental like vibe coursing throughout the film, to the point where it's just like, fuck it, that looks super cool, like it flows well, let's shoot it, let's put it in. And then they just like edit the shit out of it to make it look so beautiful. Especially them shooting on like, I think I read they shot only on like 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter film to like really authentically capture the era, which is so cool. And I loved the authenticity of it because it was
you can't tell me digital can mimic this. Everybody always said, well, you can just do it with digital, put some fucking filters on it.
You can't.
No, get fucked. Get fucked. You cannot do it. You cannot mimic it. I had it on earlier today, and Sonja was kind of like peeking her head in because Sonja can't watch horror really. And she was kind of peeking her head in, and she, you know, she was like, I told her M83 did the score because she was like, the score sounded awesome.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, M83 did it. And she was like, oh, so it's a new movie. She was even sold that it would took like it was a 70s film because it just not only shooting on film, but the way they lit it, the way that they executed everything. Yeah. As you said, Jess, he was like such a fan of the genre that Jan did his homework and, you know, they put the camera in different places than they would say if they were making a more modern horror film. And he like knew that and studied that. And that's how he executed the film.
Yeah. I even read that like for lighting, because there's a lot of like street light shots in this film.
Mhm.
They like replaced the light bulbs in the street lamps with
They
the like
did.
vintage blue bulbs that were like
Ah,
lit the streets in Paris in the 70s. And then he
cool.
said now they're orange, which like doesn't really look nice on film. So they went back and changed them to blue because it's like, one, it's authentic, and two, like blue lighting on film is just fucking gorgeous.
Yes.
So I loved that aspect of it. It's just, yeah, Jan went all in on this. Like it's such an impressive film.
He really did. And like, I don't know, even though I know people are getting brutally murdered, I just want to go everywhere that like is in this film. Like I want to
Yes.
I
The
want to go to that
clubs,
club so bad.
Oh, it looks so awesome. The vibes are just immaculate. Like, yeah, I want it to be there as well. It looks gorgeous.
And even like the super campy stuff wasn't like, I don't know, it wasn't, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't,
It was believably campy, I think.
right? And it didn't feel like gauche, like it was, or tacky. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
'Cause some camp just starts to verge on like, oh, okay, this just looks like really low budget. Like, it's like,
yes, right.
it was like believably reproduced for kind of lower budget gay porn in the 70s, but still looked like high end. I don't even know how they did that.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I wouldn't know how else to explain it, but I totally agree.
The one other thing I want to give credit to is this is a very good mystery also. Like,
oh my God.
I was legitimately trying to figure out who this killer was step by step as we made our way through the story. And I love the way the mystery ended up playing out in the end. I thought the ending was beautiful. The climax was like beautifully executed. So they do a really good on top of the stylish execution and the great lead characters. The mystery, I think, element of this is very, very strong.
It is. And it's also heartbreaking. Like, it's not just like, oh, crazy killer. Like, no, it's like when you finally put the pieces together and you get the backstory, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Like, it's
so sad. Yeah. That's what makes it so unique too, as a like a slasher in a way. I also have to like talk about Vanessa Paradis as Anne. I thought she was brilliant in this film. Like, just such a vision and also such an interesting character as like the main kind of protagonist, I guess, because she's so, one, the performance is just like, her performance I thought was so great because I literally like forgot that she was an actress. Like I was like, oh, this person just like is Anne, which is kind of scary considering Anne is like a very, very complex character.
Yes.
She has this like insanely overpowering, like uncontrollable desire to be loved by Lois, which like ultimately causes her to like unleash this like inner monster in her that's like absolutely terrifying. So I thought she was just a perfect psychologically unstable and then kind of like morally ambiguous character as well, in the way that like she is actively trying to solve this murder, but she's also making like really terrible decisions that really hurt a lot of people along the way, which
They're
just
very offensive.
Like I'm like, oh my God, I hate her. Like I hate her so much.
It's like all these people's friends are dying. Could we have the day off? No, go back to work.
Like, we're gonna put it in the film.
Making a movie about their friend dying. Are you kidding me? It's batshit crazy. But it makes her like, it adds so much depth to her character and like makes the story so compelling in that way as well. Also, I read that Jan was actually inspired by like a real woman, producer of gay porn in the 70s in France. I guess she was like considered one of the first women to do that in the industry at the time. And she was also like a violent alcoholic who like abused and humiliated all her actors, just like Anne. And apparently she also had a relationship with her editor. But like to make the character a little bit, like to soften the character a little bit, that's where he got the idea for Anne to be kind of like a woman consumed by her love for her ex-girlfriend and just like desperately trying to get her back through like her art and her images and her work in film. So I thought that was really cool.
No, it like I couldn't agree more. Like Anne is not like I've had discussions with people about this movie, and there are some people who have like rightfully so very violent reactions to Anne, where they're like, absolutely not. Like, I mean, because she kind of has a moment where we lose all redeemability for her.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I understand why some people at that point would be like, nah, fuck her. Like, I'm not, I can't like follow this woman anymore. Like, she's the worst.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she is the worst, but also like and I mean, it has to be some of the writing, but it's also the performance. She's inherently, you want to know what's going to happen because she's inherently watchable. Like she's enigmatic and charismatic. And she's one of those people that like, if you ran into out in the world, like you would want to just hang out with them, even if they were a bitch. They're just like,
you'd be drawn. I'd be so
you're drawn to them.
Her.
They're magnetic.
Yeah. Which makes her that much more scary, honestly.
Right.
Like when you do see that like really terrifying scene, you're just like, oh my God. Like I didn't see it coming too. Like she was obviously like kind of a shitty person, but like once she crosses that line, you're like, whoa, like what's going on here? So yeah, that was really interesting, like turn of events, I guess, in the mystery of all of it. And, you know, for a second there, you're like, I guess this is maybe kind of a spoiler. So spoiler to our listeners. For a second there, I was like, oh my God, maybe it's her. Like,
at a certain point, I did think it was her.
But,
and also like a spoiler when she's putting herself into homicidal.
What?
Yeah.
Dude.
I popped on that one. I popped.
Right? Like the reband, it was Anal Fury, and she changes the name. Which I mean, both names.
Both are iconic. Yeah.
But like when she puts herself in as the killer, it does make you go like, wait.
And you're like,
what is looking for common themes and threads. You're like, what is happening? And like it's like,
crazy.
Is that the function of the mask? Is it hiding Anne's identity? Like you don't know.
Right.
And yeah, I think that it's very interesting. They just made so many smart choices.
We could probably do 2 hours alone on this movie, we should probably move on. If you want to check out Knife and Heart, which you should, if you don't want to after hearing us talk about it, are you even alive, bro? It is available to stream on Shudder. It's also on AMC Plus if you've got that, and Tubi, I think, as well.
I think it's also on Canopy as well.
And on so it's everywhere. You have no excuse.
Yeah.
You have no excuse. Absolutely incredible film. Jess, thank you for recommending that one. Holy shit.
Yeah. I'm glad you guys liked it and didn't hate it.
Loved it.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Loved it.
I don't know how I couldn't not like that movie. Yeah, it was so good. Well, and if you guys watch it, stay for the credits. Oh no, I was just gonna say, if you guys watch it, you got to stay for the credits because there's like a special treat at the end and it's worth seeing.
No, it definitely is. And it is a little divisive. So that's one thing that I was like, you know, you either, I mean, because it starts strong, you know? So it's like, if it loses you in the first 5 minutes, you know, I mean, it's understandable. Some people would be lost in the first 5 minutes, but if it hooks you in the first 5 minutes, you're going to have a fucking amazing ride.
Yeah. Totally.
Well, speaking of amazing rides, Bella is going to hook us up with our second movie of the night. Bella.
Yeah, so next we have the winner of our queer horror Instagram poll. This past week, we posted 3 queer horror film options for you guys to choose from for our episode's watch list. So I'm excited to announce that our winner is Neil Jordan's 1994 gothic horror film, Interview with the Vampire. This film is based on gothic horror and fiction writer Anne Rice. The novel, she wrote a novel of the same name, which is also part of a series called The Vampire Chronicles. And the film follows Louis, a 200-year-old vampire. And after all these years in eternal darkness and isolation, he's decided to tell his life story as a vampire to a curious reporter. So through his eyes, we get to witness all of his experiences, the anguish of love and loss and just the unrelenting and deadly thirst for human blood. And this epic horror tale features a truly stellar cast. We've got Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Antonio Banderas, Stephen Rea, Christian Slater, Tandy Newton, and
if you
a
like pretty
remarkable
men, if you like really pretty men, this
You're
is the
covered.
movie for you. Yeah.
yeah, honestly. And then, of course, a remarkable 12-year-old Kirsten Dunst, who just absolutely blew me away. The film was given a $70 million budget, which was considered like pretty damn substantial, specifically for vampire movies at the time, which like I guess tended to get less money and were among more like B-level films. But I'm like, thank God it got the budget it did, because the production designers, Dante Ferretti and Francesco Lo Schiavo, and then the costume designer, Sandy Powell, they popped off. Like, they went absolutely crazy to create just such an epic and immersive world that really brought these characters and their story to life. I think this movie was just such a spectacle for me. And also, like, you give me a sexy vampire movie, TV show, or anything, and I will 100% watch it. So I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts were on this. Had you guys seen it before?
I had seen it a very long time ago and didn't really remember much of it, to be honest. I remember, like, when I talked to my mom about it, that's going to be a common thing that keeps coming up. Hi, Mom. She said she's also going to listen. So,
woo! Yay. Hi, Mom.
Shout out to Jody.
Jody.
Hi, Jody.
But, I was talking to my mom about it, and she was like, "Oh, that movie! I remember watching 5 minutes, and I thought it was weird, so I turned it off." And I was like,
fair.
And yeah, classic mom. So yeah, I didn't really remember much of it, and oh my God, I love this movie. It is so much fun. I want to share my subheading with everyone. Like, so if it's Interview with the Vampire, my subheading for this movie is Lestat is the messiest mommy.
Yeah.
Because this, like, I know it's not supposed to be a comedy. This is like camp. I want to have like, a party. Like, we need to have like, if there's not already like Interview with the Vampire shadow cast screenings, like they do with Rocky Horror.
Oh, this would make a great shadow cast.
How is there not? Yeah, that would be amazing.
So yeah, that's my thoughts, Nick.
We'll have to start it.
Well, before I give my thoughts on the film, I want to give you the Gimme Three podcast fun fact of the day.
Ooh.
And that is that my wife, my beautiful wife, Sonja Mereu, actually auditioned for this film.
What?
As the role that Kirsten Dunst got.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so she said it wasn't like a super formal audition. It was kind of like a open casting call, but she went in and they saw her, and they didn't like give her the sides or anything. So she had to have something prepared. So she read like a Shel Silverstein poem.
Cool.
But anyways, that's the Gimme Three fun fact of the day.
That's iconic.
Really fun fact. Yeah. I can't believe that. My mind's kind of blown right now.
I've always been a fan of this film, and it's one of those movies where, you know, watching it growing up, again, like you said earlier, Jess, the camp kind of goes over your head.
Right.
I was like adoringly terrified of this film in the same way that I was like adoringly terrified by the Thriller music video. Like, it gave me nightmares, but I like also wanted to watch it.
Yes, yep. I love that.
But what also went over my head when I was a little kid was the gayness, just how gay it is.
It is so gay. So gay. Anyone who wants to say it's not, fight me.
And, you know, I have not checked out the new AMC Plus series, which I think is 2 seasons in. But I've heard great things. I've heard that they don't put a coat of paint over over the queerness like this film tries to do.
No, I've heard they proudly display it.
Yeah, that one I think is a little more out loud and proud. So I'm interested to check that out.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, I mean, I love this film. The performances are great. It's just a great popcorn film. And I just miss Tom Cruise doing shit like this.
Yes.
Like, remember when he used to just do crazy shit?
Right?
Like, those were the days. Those were the fucking days. The days were called the 90s, but man, I was like, man, he was so good at doing weird shit like this and just like stretching himself. Ah, boy.
Yeah, I'm not a big Tom Cruise fan.
Me too. I'm sorry.
I live in Los Angeles, and so every time I pass the Scientology Center, I get a little shiver runs through me.
That's why he stopped doing it, because the Scientologist said,
right.
You gotta just do the Mission Impossible stuff. Buddy.
Exactly. And so, and so I forget. Like, I'm like, now with the stuff that comes out, I'm just like, yeah, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
But then in watching this, he gives 115%. Like,
there you go.
His performance is so good.
Whiny coward of a vampire who prowls the night killing rats and poodles. You could have finished us both. You condemn me to hell. I don't know any hell. Oh, that's more like it. That's why I chose you. But you can't kill me, Louis. Feed on what you will. Rats, chickens, poodles. I'll leave you to it and watch you come around. But just remember, life without me would be even more unbearable.
It's so good. It kind of carries, honestly.
It does, because like Brad Pitt is like peak emo pretty boy. Like, he's just like, oh, I'm alive and I don't want to be. I'm in hell on
he gives
earth.
nothing but looks.
Yeah.
It was, yes, like I looked it up, and this was apparently came out the same year as Legends of the Fall, which is again Brad Pitt pretty boy.
Yeah.
So he was in his pretty boy era. And
there we go. Yeah.
And that he was serving that in this movie.
Yes, I totally agree. Oh my God, I love vampires so much. I love like the eroticism of vampirism, and because there's such an interesting lore with vampires that makes it where there's like so many themes to play with when like telling these kinds of stories. And that's where like Louis and, how do you say his name? Lestat?
Lestat.
Okay, yeah. Have like such an interesting relationship, because like specifically the relationship of vampire maker versus his creation. Because like at first I was like kind of expecting it to be more of like in a religious context, like God and human kind of like, maker, and I don't know. I'm stumbling around to explain this. But basically, like similar to like a religious person's connection or faith in God, I guess. But then it actually seems to have somewhat more of like an erotic or sexual tone to it. And they're like bounded in this like deep relationship. And even like the transformation itself seems kind of like sexual or pleasurable in nature.
Thank you, Bella, because
like
that
the way they feed off of each other.
In my notes, I like put Lestat literally sweeps Brad Pitt off his feet.
Yes.
Like, literally sweeps him into the air. And then they have like the whole, transformation. And then they collapse, like post-coital collapse on the ground.
Yeah.
I'm like, this
very
is
romantic.
It's so romantic.
Shot. Yeah.
It's hot. Yeah.
It is hot.
I mean, and then of course, like, that is not to say that that's like the same case with like Claudia, the 5-year-old child. Like that's much more of like a father-daughter bond than like sexual, thank God.
Sir, 2 gay dads.
Yeah.
I know they're co-parenting
so
this
cute.
little girl.
I want some more.
Well, I know. But it's best in the beginning. Lest the death takes you down with it. And you've done very well. Look at you. Not a drop spilt. Very good.
Where's Mama?
Mama's gone to heaven, Shaggy, like that sweet lady. Right there. They all go to heaven. All but us. Phew. Do you want to frighten our little daughter?
I'm not your daughter.
Oh, yes, you are. You're mine and Louis's daughter now. You see, Louis was going to leave us. He was going to go away. But now he's not. Now he's going to stay and make you happy.
Louis.
You fiend. One happy family.
Tell me it's not gay.
It's insane that anyone has tried to see it any other way.
They're just really good friends.
Yeah.
That
Of
want to spend
course.
eternity together.
Exactly.
But I think
so good.
with this movie and with the book, I think one of the big reasons why the book was such a smash hit, was because it kind of went behind the curtains and was like inside the psyche of the vampires a little bit more than, say, like your standard vampire fare where there's just like they're monsters. And this kind of like explored the feelings, the insecurities, the what is it like mentally and emotionally to be a vampire. And I think that's what kind of struck the chord with this film also.
Totally.
I think people who are a big fan of the book don't necessarily like this movie because this movie, I think, steers off. It's the adaptation, I guess, is I have not fully read the book. I've read about half of it, but it goes pretty far away from the book in certain instances and with big elements of the story. So big Anne Rice fans don't necessarily love this film. I know Anne Rice was not a fan of Tom Cruise being cast as Lestat in this film.
Yeah.
But, and I know Oprah Winfrey walked out 30 minutes in the film. That's my trivia for.
I do want to give Anne Rice a shout out for writing the screenplay.
Yeah.
You know, like, kudos.
Seriously. I really want to read the book and honestly like the whole series now. I'm like so drawn in.
This series, like I remember I used to read Anne Rice like all the time in high school. I need to like go back. I think it was more like middle school. See, it's just, pervasive. It's all over my life. And I was of the camp when I remember reading the books. And, the movie had been out forever at that point that I was reading them. And I think when I endeavored to like, oh, should I watch the film? I was thrown, like what you were saying, Nick, about how people were like, oh, it's so different. They weren't as accepting. And I think I felt that way too. But like, I don't know. I love Queen of the Damned.
Yeah.
And I loved it back then too. Like, so the skewing towards I think when they went more metal, like where it was like darker and like I think the fans really appreciated that more, and this one doesn't. Like this one's like we're in high society.
Yeah, right.
Seriously.
Rest in peace, Aaliyah.
I know we're not talking about that film, but
I know
the soundtrack in that film is so good. I'm done.
I think I had that soundtrack on compact disc.
I still listen to it at work. That's what's on my Spotify.
Yeah.
When people come in and ask me corporate questions, I am listening to the Queen of the Damned soundtrack.
That's awesome.
Any final thoughts on Interview with the Vampire before we move on?
I just want to say that the scene, this is a major spoiler, but the scene where Lestat decides to kill the vampire colony is one of the best fucking things
Yeah.
I've ever
Dude.
seen, where he's just like, I'm gonna pour all this wine and I'm gonna like sassily tip over this candelabra and everything is on fire. He's got a giant scythe and these vampires are just popping out of coffins and he's cutting them in half. I was like, oh, what is, how have I never seen this? Like, and also shout out to Armand's hair.
Yes.
Oh my God.
I literally
yes.
just have a note here that just in all caps, Armand's hair. So
Wowza.
So good. Honestly, though, yeah, that scene was. I'm so glad you brought it up because it literally made me think. I was like, if there's one thing I might love more than like vampire love, it's vampire revenge. That scene got me amped up.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
and also Lestat does swoop in, and I mean, like, again, tell me it's not gay. Lestat at the end, again, spoiler, so if you need to skip ahead, but Lestat takes Louis's new boyfriend. Okay, he comes in because Christian Slater also, shout out to Christian Slater. Like, I was like, what, Christian Slater?
I know.
But like Christian Slater's like, take me, Louis, and it's, you know, it's not super sexual, okay, but like he's just like, I can do it, like, make me a vampire, and Louis like, no, and like rejects him. And then who shows up? Lestat's like, you're my boyfriend now. And then they like driving off, not into
together.
the sunset, but like the moonrise,
Right.
to Sympathy for the Devil. Like,
Dude, that ending low-key took me so off guard.
So
I was like, wait, what?
he's unkillable. Lestat
Yeah.
just always shows up and he's like, hello, you meant to kill me, but you didn't.
It's so awesome. Oh, I loved it.
Interview with the Vampire, and it is available on demand, I believe. I believe you have to rent it on demand, or if you're going to rent it, might as well check out the incredible video stores, Vidiots, Cinephile Video, and Videotech if you live in Los Angeles. And if you live in another city, I'm sure there's a video store surviving and trying to thrive somewhere. Why don't you help them out by going to your local video store and checking it out? Well, homies, it is time that we take a break. During that break, you are going to hear from the woman who auditioned for Interview with the Vampire. That's right, PGA producer, Gimme Three producer, and my wife, Sonja Mereu, in a segment that we call Sonja's Movie Minute. Stick around for that and much more here on the Gimme Three podcast.
Hello, I'm Sonja, and this is my Movie Minute. I watched Poltergeist when I was 6 years old, and I have literally never been the same. The two things I remember always doing with my dad when I was a kid were eating junk food, like McDonald's and donuts, and watching movies. I think we usually went to family-friendly movies, like Look Who's Talking, or movies that were at least semi-kid appropriate, like John Waters' Hairspray and The Legend of Billie Jean. We also always watched the new episodes of The Simpsons. But on one occasion, he rented Poltergeist. To this day, he claims that he had no idea it was a horror movie. He says that because it had a picture of a little girl watching TV on the VHS cover that he thought it was a kid's movie. It is not a kid's movie. I still contend that the name and general vibe of the cover gives it away, and he just wanted to watch a scary movie. By the end of Poltergeist, I was terrified of TVs, closets, clowns, swimming pools, and just generally afraid to do anything or be anywhere alone. And I've never fully shaken it. I'm the kind of person who will check closets and under beds when I check into an Airbnb. And I definitely keep all the lights on and blinds closed if I'm home alone at night. And I definitely do not watch scary movies. So, since Father's Day is coming up, I want to wish a very happy Father's Day to my dad, Steve. I love you, but I'm also scarred for life.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles. And this is part 1 of 2. We are discussing queer horror, and we've got a special guest with us, Jess McLaughlin. And thus far on this queer horror episode, we've discussed the incredible film Knife and Heart and the 90s gothic horror vampire erotic thriller Interview with the Vampire. But now for this episode, Jess is going to wrap us up here with a real gem, a real underground gem here. So Jess, take it away.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Nick. I'm going to introduce Alucarda from 1977. This was directed by Juan Lopez Moctezuma, and in a lot of interviews, Guillermo del Toro cites this as a seminal influence for him. He loved Juan Lopez Moctezuma, and he loves this film, and I can see why. It's inspired by the 1872 horror novella Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, and Alucarda follows a pair of young women who are both at a Catholic orphanage, and they develop an instant and intense obsession with one another. Alucarda, the alpha of the two, and possible child of Satan, leads naive Justine down a path of blood oaths, death pacts, naked makeout sessions, and forest orgies. When the two publicly renounce God and praise Satan, the orphanage sets out on the warpath to purge them of evil, no matter the cost. And oh, what a battle then commences.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Jess, I got to really thank you again for recommending this, because I had this DVD sitting in my cabinet for years and hadn't opened it up. I bought it, I believe, from Vinegar Syndrome, just because I saw the cover and I was like, I got to have that. So I hadn't even opened it up until now, and I just loved it.
What you think?
I loved it. I loved it. First, let me just say the film transfer, I think, looks perfect on the DVD. The colors are rich and bold, but it still has your spots of dust and your scratches and the imperfections that still make it feel like you're watching it in a grindhouse.
And the cigarette burns.
And yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the film is grindhousey, but there is a level of artistry here that you don't always see in grindhouse films, and I really appreciated that. And I just, Alucarda, the character, she's got that unresistible kind of crazy, that moment when she first pops up behind what's her name, and she's like Justine. She's like, "Ooh, hello," and I'm like, "Oh," you look at her eyes and you're like, "Oh, you're crazy," and shit, I'm in love with you. Also, fuck.
Tina, shout out to Tina Romero, who's the actress who plays both Alucarda and her mother at the beginning. She plays giving birth to Alucarda and then later Alucarda. She kills it. She is psycho, but in the best, beautiful way possible. She's you can't take your eyes off her.
No. Yeah. What'd you think, Bella?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I was like, witchy lesbians in a 70s sacrilegious horror film. What more could I want? That's perfect. That's perfection right there. And yeah, I thought it was so cool to learn about the gothic novella that this is based on. Because it was for me, I was like, oh, of course, we all thought that the first vampire reference in literature was a man with Bram Stoker's Dracula, but this came out I think it was 25 years before that book, and it's a female a lesbian vampire love affair, and I'm just oh wow, that's fucking awesome. And then realizing that Alucarda is basically Dracula spelled backwards, I was oh hell yeah, I knew I was in for a treat. I was let's go. But yeah, I loved every second of this movie. And this story as well. I really hope that this pops up in a theater nearby, because I would love to see it on the big screen, because just every visual, everything about it is just spectacular. It's such an immersive movie. Yeah, and it's really interesting to think about. I feel there's so many different ways to interpret this film, especially as queer horror. So I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about it. Like my initial interpretation was just right off the bat kind of like all the satanic sinfulness, like exorcism stuff going on seemed to be kind of like a metaphor for like the shame or like suppression of sexuality or homosexuality as well, and even just like womanhood in the Catholic Church.
Right.
Even if the gain be small, his harvest is great. But God, in his infinite wisdom, understands the wiles of the devil. And so he gives us the strength to face them with noble thoughts and prayer. In this way, Justine, Alucarda, I trust that you have been listening.
Yes, sister.
Then you can repeat what I've just read. Well, Alucarda? Stand up, child.
And this is what the devil does. He grants us virtues to expand his kingdom, the only valid one.
God, with his lack of knowledge, does not understand this truth and opposes it with false thoughts and prayers. God, silence!
Satan, 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 our Lord and Master, I acknowledge thee as my God and Prince. I promise to serve and obey thee as long as I shall live. I renounce the other God and all the saints.
Don't listen to them! Don't listen to them!
Our Lord.
You know, like Alucarda grew up in that like repressed and strict culture. And so then when like Justine comes along and they like she falls in love with her, like it honestly makes my heart hurt when like to see how stifled and like suffocated their love is by all the like nuns and priests in the orphanage or the convent or whatever. And, you know, eventually, I guess, spoiler, eventually like their flame is just completely snuffed out and it's like absolutely heartbreaking. And then on top of that, I mentioned like a repression of womanhood, because one thing that really stood out to me was the costumes in this film. I'm like absolutely obsessed with Alucarda's black Victorian dress.
Yes.
It's so cool. It kind of reminded me of Isabella Johnny's dress in Possession, which I've actually never
Yeah.
even seen, but it's been on my list for so long. And I feel like this had to have like inspired that. But anyways, aside from like Alucarda and Justine's dresses, which I loved, I was really intrigued by the nuns' costumes because they're like
They're so wild.
they're wild. They're like wrapped in these like dirty rags with like red stains running down the front of their skirts. So immediately I was like, oh, like period stains. And then like the more I thought about it, the more I was like, and the more we like see how the convent deals with all this stuff, I was like, oh, that kind of seems like these women are like forced to wear these dirty stained rags as like another symbol of shame. Like they're being publicly shamed for just being a woman. So I just thought there was like a lot of really interesting levels of criticism about like how the Catholic Church has historically and honestly like continues to sometimes negatively treat gay people and women. So this was a very like ahead of its time, crazy movie to me in that way, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. I know that also one of the things that we're seeing, it's something that's interested me for a long time, and you see it kind of pop up. You know, it's like the pendulum of popular culture where stuff will come and go, and it always comes back around. And right now we're in kind of a resurgence of looking at women's rights and bodily autonomy within structures of power. And we have that, I mean, one thing that we return to, because it is something that is ancient in a way, is religion.
Right.
And one of the things that we're seeing, like in movie theaters recently, we saw Immaculate and we saw The First Omen. And we have, those are stories of these women that are in these constrictive environments trying to just like do what they want with their lives and their bodies and maintain that autonomy. And Alucarda like does that as well. And so I do want to give flowers to, if you watch the opening credits, it says that the idea for the film, it gives credit to Alexis Arroyo and Tita Arroyo, and then Juan and Yolanda El Moctezuma. So I think there were some women who were giving their opinions.
Mhm.
Let's go.
Yeah. So I wanted to call that out because no, you're absolutely right, Bella. Like it's in watching this film, you definitely feel that presence of like that tension where these women are just trying to like. There's a lot in here. There's a lot in this film.
It reminded me of like I was reading this article on Gaily Dreadful, and it was written by this woman named Amber Walker, and she was talking about this movie and films like it, and just like the repression and shame in like religious settings with this experience. And I just thought she had such a great quote that related to this. She said, with the rhetoric around him, Lucifer seems like a much better ally than God ever was.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really funny. I was like, that like perfectly describes this film.
I love that.
So I thought that was great and had to share.
And also there's something really interesting because I've seen this a number of times now, and in rewatching this round I started thinking about Angelica, and like she's madly in love with Angelica's like, you know, Sister Angelica's like one of the nuns, and she's like madly in love with Justine.
Totally.
Yes, totally.
And so it was really interesting to be like, okay, you have Alucarda, who's like the personification of evil, but you also have this spiritual who ends up like, spoiler alert, she becomes like the vision of Christ, that defeats Alucarda at the end. Like, so she like, you have these two women who are, we kind of have like a lesbian love triangle going on for the affections of Justine, and also like in a spiritual reading, like Justine's soul and what's going to happen to it. Is it going to be damned or is it going to be saved? Like, but it's these two women and their love. So it's just, I don't know. Like there's so many things.
Much. Yeah, there's this, you could unpack so much from this film.
Lots of layers. And if layers aren't your thing, you know, and rain and blood and titties are your thing, then this movie's still for you, you know?
I was going to say blood, like this is the definition of like a blood-soaked horror film. That scene, spoiler, of Justine rising from a blood-filled coffin, like a literal bloodbath, was such a terrifying image. Like it had me shaking in my boots. I was like, oh my God. And then that ending, like, are you kidding me? It's batshit crazy. It's so much fun.
It is. And like, I put like, after I first watched this, it took me too long to watch this, I will say that. Like I first watched this probably maybe 6 or 7 months ago. I don't know but like probably within a year. And when I first watched it, I posted it on social media, on my Instagram. I was like, the images in this film are going to stick with me like the Devils. I don't know if anyone's seen that. Like, but it's on that level of like the Devils and Haksan, which are two of like my favorite films that are just shot beautifully. And it's on that level. Like, it's just iconic imagery, even before the ending, when things just like, when shit gets real and everything's on fire.
It's like hell on earth.
Like, even just that initial, I guess it's when I don't know if it's a service or whatever, but the priest is talking to the congregation, and you are in this sanctuary, and it's literally like 70 crucifixes with Jesus in the background. Like, it's just like
overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. It's insane. The production design on this is and the cinematography, like everything.
You mentioned all the fire at the end, so now it's time for Nick's dad joke of the day.
Oh, yay. Let's go.
This film really goes out in a blaze of glory.
I love it. It does.
That's perfect.
It does. It does go out in a blaze of glory. And it's just like, I think it's so funny that when this came out, it was seen as blasphemous, and like, I can see why maybe some things.
It makes sense.
There's some ground for that, but like, there a lot of it, like, I don't understand in a way why it's seen as blasphemous against the church, because like the church is the good guy in a way. Like, a lot of this stuff is bad, where like, they're showing that, you know, you have like an exorcism that leads to an exorcism that
Yeah.
leads to the death of one of the people, the temporary death of one of the people. So you have like these things of like, this quote unquote ignorance of religion. But then ultimately you have like the horror trope of the Western, educated doctor who is the science man who comes in and he's like, you uneducated religion people, how can you do this? Look what you've done.
This is
And
the
then
most primitive display of ignorance I've ever seen.
Yes.
That was my favorite line.
Yes. I
He's
wrote
like,
it
this is
down,
not
too.
the 1500s. Like,
Yeah.
he's just like, poo, you Catholic people. And then he comes face to face with stuff that, science cannot explain. It's, time and time again, we see it in horror movies. And, he can't explain it. And he has to rely on religion to save the day, which is like, we see this.
Yeah.
We see this in The Conjuring. We see this like, in a lot of stuff that has a lot of conservative values in the horror genre. And yeah, like, so I look at it now and I'm like, why is it blasphemous? And then I'm like, yeah, Jessica, you know why there's some reasons.
I love how much the scientist switches, or the doctor switches up. Like, he starts going crazy with the holy water on Justine at the end. Like, he's just living in it, and it's so funny to me. It's like fully just switched sides way too fast. So yeah, this movie had a lot of very like campy, funny moments in it too, which I really loved. Like, even just, I loved the visual of at the very end with Alucarda, where she's got like the flame in her eyes.
Like to show her pyrokinesis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love it.
It was so awesome.
I have two modern day, and this is my Nick, you have your dad joke. I'm going to be the elder Gen Z, like the Zillennial who's trying to be cool. Okay.
Awesome.
So I have two references. I want to say, and they were roommates, because they were.
Yes.
Yes.
And also we have you versus the one she tells you not to worry about, which is Alucarda versus Angelica. And Angelica being the literal embodiment of Christ.
It's so good.
That's it. I'm putting away my references.
I love it. I love it. That was perfect timing, honestly. Perfect reference.
We got something for everybody here at the Gimme Three podcast, everybody. Alucarda is available on DVD. You can hit me up and I will let you borrow it.
I also have a DVD of it as well.
Look at that. There's two places you can get
There's
it.
two places.
Wow. So generous.
You can also check out your local video stores. I'm sure they have it as well. But Vinegar Syndrome. Did you get yours from Vinegar Syndrome? Or where did you get yours, Jess?
I ashamedly bought it off of the corporate overlord of Amazon.
Okay. Well, so if you guys go to Amazon, is it .com or .org?
It's .com.
I think it's Amazon.com. www.amazon.com.
I'm sorry, small business.
And check out Alucarda. Well, my friends, that is a wrap on today's episode. But if you haven't had your fill of queer horror, if you haven't had your fill of Jess McLaughlin, if you haven't had your fill of blood, we've got good news for you, because this Thursday we return with part 2 of our queer horror exploration. And until then, we want to hear from you. Your questions, your suggestions, your thoughts, your desires. Or if you just want to hit me up and be like, yo, Nick, how do I get this Alucarda from you? Hit me up. Hit us up. You can message us on Instagram at Gimme Three Podcast. That's GIMME. Spell out 3 podcast. Gimme 3 podcast. You can send us a text message. You can do that by scrolling down to our episode description. And at the top, you'll see a link that says, send us a text message. Click on that, and then you can send us whatever you want to send us. Jess, A, thank you for being here. B,
thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah. Our pleasure. And then B, tell the people where they can follow you, where they can find you, and where they can stay up to date on your film, Pangs.
When in doubt, you can go to abnormalfilm.com, but I do have social media accounts. And I think every single one of my personal social media accounts is at the Orig MC. Orig is ORIG. And then for Pangs, the upcoming short film of queer puberty horror goodness, we have at Pangs_film on Instagram and at Pangs Film on X.
Mm-hmm. Bella, tell the people where they can follow you on the socials.
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile, or on Letterboxd at BFstratus. Just B and then my last name, F Stratus.
You can follow me on Letterboxd at Nicholas Ibarra, on Instagram at Nicholas Ibarra, and on Twitter, also known as X, at Nicholas P. Ibarra, and the P stands for Pangs.
Hey, it all comes back.
It all comes
It's
back.
cyclical.
It all comes back. I'm a pro. I'm a true pro. Thank you all for listening to the Gimme Three podcast, and we will see you at the movies.